The lights dimmed, the crowd murmured, and in the front row a man known for crushing dreams leaned back in his chair with a skeptical half-smile. But by the end of this audition, even Elvis would have stood up and applauded, and Simon Cowell would be left speechless. Before we begin, if you believe in impossible dreams and underdog stories that make your heart race, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this remind us that talent can come from anywhere. Even the smallest streets of Cebu. 17-year-old Mateo Cruz stood backstage on the massive stage of America's Got Talent, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the cuffs of his simple black blazer. He wasn't wearing designer shoes or a sparkling costume. Just polished black loafers his mother had bought secondhand in Cebu City, Philippines. His thick black hair was neatly combed back, his jaw tight with nerves, and his warm brown eyes reflected both fear and determination. He could hear the roar of the audience beyond the curtain, thousands of strangers waiting to judge him in seconds. Back home in Cebu, Mateo wasn't a celebrity. He was the quiet boy who sang at family gatherings and church events. His father, a jeepney driver with calloused hands and a tired smile, used to play old records on a dusty turntable every Sunday. Among those records was one artist Mateo had grown up idolizing, Elvis Presley. While other kids listened to modern pop hits, Mateo memorized every run, every growl, every tremble in Elvis's voice. He didn't just copy him, he felt him. But loving Elvis wasn't always cool. In high school, classmates laughed at him. "Why do you sing like an old man?" they teased. Some recorded him secretly and posted clips online, mocking his old-school style. Mateo would go home pretending it didn't hurt, but at night he would sing quietly in his small bedroom, imagining a stage far bigger than Cebu. He wasn't trying to be Elvis. He was trying to prove that real music never dies. When his mother saw an online audition announcement for America's Got Talent, she jokingly said, "What if Cebu sends its own king?" Mateo laughed it off at first. The thought of flying to America seemed impossible. They barely had enough savings for daily expenses. But his parents believed in him more than he believed in himself. His father sold his old motorbike. His mother borrowed money from relatives. The community even held a small fundraiser after hearing Mateo sing at a barangay event. For the first time, he realized this wasn't just his dream anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed in him. Now, standing behind that curtain in Los Angeles, he whispered a quiet prayer. "This is for you, Mama. This is for you, Papa." The announcer called his name. The curtain parted. The spotlight hit his face. The stage suddenly felt enormous, almost swallowing him whole. At the judges' table sat the famously critical Simon Cowell, leaning forward with a curious but guarded expression. Simon glanced at his card. Mateo Cruz. 17. From Cebu, Philippines. He looked up. "That's a long way to come. What are you going to sing?" Mateo swallowed. "An Elvis song, sir." The audience reacted with a mix of excitement and doubt. Elvis songs had been done countless times. Some people even chuckled. Simon raised an eyebrow. "That's brave. We've heard a lot of Elvis." Mateo nodded. "Yes, sir. But you haven't heard me." For a split second, there was silence. Then the music began. A slow, haunting instrumental introduction filled the theater. Mateo closed his eyes. When he sang the first note, something shifted. It wasn't imitation. It wasn't karaoke. It was soul. His voice carried a rich, velvety depth far beyond his 17 years. The low notes rolled out smooth and controlled, sending goosebumps across the crowd. As he moved into the chorus, he added his own subtle twists, small emotional breaks, a slight Filipino vibrato woven into the classic rock and roll phrasing. The audience, once doubtful, leaned in. Simon's expression changed. His smirk faded. His eyes narrowed, not in criticism, but in focus. He wasn't hearing a teenager trying to copy a legend. He was hearing a young artist honoring one. Midway through the song, the band cut out for a brief a cappella moment. Just Mateo and the silence. His voice cracked slightly, not from lack of skill, but from pure emotion. And that crack made it real. It felt human. It felt honest. In that moment, he wasn't in Los Angeles. He was back in Cebu, singing in a small living room while his father tapped his foot to the rhythm. When the final note rang out, it soared as strong, sustained, powerful. He held it just long enough to make the entire theater hold its breath. Then silence. And then, an eruption. The audience leaped to their feet in a thunderous standing ovation. Cheers echoed through the auditorium. Some people wiped tears from their eyes. Mateo stood frozen, overwhelmed, blinking back his own tears. Simon Cowell slowly stood up. For a man known for brutal honesty, this was rare. He clapped deliberately, his face serious but impressed. When the noise finally died down, Simon leaned into his microphone. "You know," he began, pausing for effect, "when you said you were singing Elvis, I thought, oh no, not again." The crowd laughed nervously. Mateo's heart pounded. "But what you did was not an impression. It was a tribute with your own identity. And that is very, very difficult to do." Mateo's lips trembled. Simon continued, "You have an authenticity about you. And your voice? It's incredible. I think even Elvis would applaud that." The audience roared again. Tears streamed down Mateo's face as the judges voted. One by one, glowing green yes lights lit up. For yes. He had done it. A boy from Cebu, who once sang alone in his bedroom while classmates laughed, was now being celebrated on one of the biggest stages in the world. Back in the Philippines, his family and neighbors had gathered around a small television to watch the broadcast weeks later. When Simon's words echoed through their living room, his mother covered her mouth and cried. His father stood silently, eyes glistening, remembering the old vinyl records and the Sundays they had shared. But the real victory wasn't the applause. It wasn't the standing ovation. It was the message. Mateo didn't win the competition that year. He made it far farther than anyone expected, but eventually, the journey ended. Yet when he returned to Cebu, he wasn't the same shy boy. He visited schools and told students, "Don't let anyone tell you your style is outdated. Music, like dreams, doesn't expire." He started recording original songs blending classic rock with Filipino influences. He posted them online. Slowly, his following grew. Not because he was copying a legend, but because he respected one while building his own path. And that is what makes this story unforgettable. It's not about fame. It's about courage. It's about parents who sacrifice quietly. It's about a community that believes. It's about a teenager who dared to sing an old song in a modern world and made it sound brand new. So if this story moved you even a little, tap that like button and subscribe to the channel. Because somewhere out there, another Mateo is practicing in a small room, waiting for someone to believe in him. And remember this, you don't have to be from Hollywood to make the world listen. Sometimes, all it takes is heart, heritage, and one brave step onto the stage. The crowd was ready to be entertained. Simon Cowell was ready to be unimpressed. But no one, absolutely no one, was ready for the moment a 17-year-old boy from Cebu would open his mouth and make the entire theater feel like 1956 again. And by the end of it, even Elvis would have applauded. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because stories like this aren't just about talent, they're about courage, family, sacrifice, and dreams that refuse to die. Mateo Ramirez was 17 years old, lean and slightly shy, with warm brown skin and thick jet black hair he carefully styled into a classic pompadour. He wasn't trying to look cool. He wasn't trying to be trendy. He simply admired a different era. Growing up in Cebu City, Philippines, Mateo fell in love with old vinyl records his grandfather kept in a wooden cabinet near the kitchen. Among them was a collection of songs by Elvis Presley. While other kids his age blasted modern pop on their phones, Mateo sat cross-legged on the floor, studying every breath, every vibrato, every emotional crack in Elvis's voice. But it wasn't about imitation. It was about connection. The way Elvis sang about heartbreak and hope felt real to him. It felt human. But loving old music in a modern high school wasn't easy. Classmates teased him. They called him Lolo, grandfather. Some said his dream was outdated. A few even recorded him singing during lunch break and posted it online with laughing emojis. Mateo smiled on the outside, but every joke cut deep. He began to question himself. Maybe they were right. Maybe the world had moved on. At home, things weren't perfect either. His father worked long hours as a mechanic, coming home with grease-stained hands and tired eyes. His mother ran a small carinderia, waking up at 4 a.m. to cook meals to sell. Money was tight. Some months were harder than others. But whenever Mateo sang in their tiny living room, something magical happened. His father would close his eyes. His mother would stop stirring the pot. For a few minutes, the stress disappeared. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at school, Mateo told his parents he was thinking about giving up singing. Maybe it's not for me, he said quietly. His father looked at him firmly. When you sing, Anik, you don't just sing. You make people feel. That is not something you throw away. A few weeks later, they saw an online audition notice for America's Got Talent. It felt impossible. America was so far away. The application process was intimidating. But Mateo's mother insisted, what's impossible today might be your testimony tomorrow. They recorded an audition video using an old smartphone. No fancy lighting. No studio microphone. Just Mateo standing in front of a plain curtain, singing his heart out. Weeks passed with no response. Mateo tried not to hope too much. Then one afternoon, an email arrived. He had been invited to audition in person. The family cried. Then reality hit. How would they afford it? Plane tickets were expensive. Visa fees. Accommodation. It seemed like the dream might end before it even began. But Cebu has a way of lifting its own. Friends donated small amounts. Neighbors organized a mini benefit concert at the barangay hall where Mateo performed. His teachers contributed what they could. His father even pawned his old watch, a gift from his own father, without telling anyone at first. Finally, with just enough money, Mateo boarded a plane for the first time in his life. Los Angeles was overwhelming. The buildings were taller than anything he had ever seen. The studios were massive. Backstage at America's Got Talent, he adjusted his simple black blazer, white button-down shirt, and slim black trousers. His shoes were polished carefully, though slightly worn at the edges. His heart pounded so loudly he thought the microphone might pick it up. When his name was called, he walked onto the stage under bright lights. The audience clapped politely. At the judges' table sat the famously critical Simon Cowell, known for dismantling weak performances with a single sentence. Simon looked at Mateo and asked, "So, what are you going to sing?" "An Elvis song, sir," Mateo replied, voice steady but soft. Simon leaned back slightly. "We've heard a lot of Elvis over the years." The audience murmured. Some looked skeptical. Another Elvis tribute? Really? Mateo smiled gently. "Yes, sir. But I promise, I'll sing it my way." The music began, slow, soulful, instantly recognizable. Mateo closed his eyes. The first note left his mouth smooth and controlled, rich with warmth. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was honest. As he moved into the second verse, something shifted. His voice carried emotion far beyond his age. There was a subtle Filipino soulfulness woven into the classic rock style. He didn't mimic Elvis's movements dramatically. Instead, he stood grounded, letting the voice do the storytelling. By the time he reached the chorus, the audience was no longer skeptical. They were mesmerized. Simon leaned forward, elbows on the desk. His expression changed from polite interest to genuine focus. Then came the risky part. The music softened, nearly disappearing. Mateo sang his section almost a cappella. No safety net. No loud instruments to hide behind. Just raw voice echoing through the massive theater. For a brief second, his voice trembled, not from fear, but from emotion. He thought about his father's pawned watch. His mother's early mornings. The laughter at school. The barangay fundraiser. Everything poured into that note. When he reached the final chorus, he didn't just sing it. He lived it. He extended the last note powerfully, holding it with controlled vibrato until the entire room felt suspended in time. Silence. And then an explosion of applause. The audience jumped to their feet. A standing ovation. Some people wiped tears from their eyes. Mateo stood frozen, stunned, as the sound washed over him. Simon Cowell slowly stood up. That alone said everything. When the applause finally calmed, Simon spoke. Mateo. I wasn't expecting that. He paused. You didn't try to copy a legend. You respected him. And you brought something fresh. That was authentic. Mateo's eyes filled with tears. Simon added, I think even Elvis would have enjoyed that performance. The crowd roared again. For yes. Unanimous. Back home in Cebu, his family and neighbors gathered around a small television weeks later to watch the episode air. When Simon's praise echoed through their living room, his mother sobbed openly. His father looked down quietly, overwhelmed with pride. Mateo didn't just win votes that day. He won belief. Though he didn't take home the grand prize that season, his audition went viral. Millions watched it. Messages flooded in from people who felt inspired by his courage. He returned to Cebu not as a defeated contestant, but as proof that dreams don't have a zip code. He started writing original songs, blending classic rock influences with Filipino storytelling. He performed at local events, then national shows. Each time he stepped on stage, he carried the same humility. And whenever someone asked him how it felt to stand in front of Simon Cowell, he would smile and say, the stage is big. The lights are bright. But if your heart is bigger than your fear, you'll be okay. So if this story touched you, if you believe that talent can rise from the narrowest streets to the grandest stages, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because somewhere right now, another young dreamer is being laughed at for loving something different. And maybe, just maybe, that dreamer is one performance away from proving the world wrong. The audience expected another cover song. Simon Cowell expected another hopeful dreamer. But what happened that night would echo far beyond the stage, because when a skinny 17-year-old from Cebu opened his mouth, time itself seemed to rewind, and for a few breathtaking minutes, even Elvis would have stood up and clapped. If you believe dreams have no borders, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because stories like this don't just entertain, they remind us that greatness can rise from anywhere. His name was Daniel Alcantara. 17 years old. Tall but slightly awkward in posture, with nervous hands he kept rubbing against his dark blue trousers. He wore a fitted white dress shirt, sleeves buttoned tightly at the wrists, and a slim black tie that looked just a little too formal for someone his age. His thick black hair was styled into a modest pompadour, clearly inspired by his idol, Elvis Presley, but not exaggerated. His brown eyes carried a mix of fear and quiet determination. Back home in Cebu, Philippines, Daniel was known as the Old Soul. While other teenagers danced to viral hits, Daniel spent evenings listening to crackling vinyl records his grandmother had preserved for decades. Elvis wasn't just music to him. It was emotion. It was storytelling. It was a voice that made him feel less alone during the hardest years of his life. Because Daniel's life hadn't been easy. When he was 14, his father left to work overseas and never came back. No goodbye explanation. Just silence. Daniel watched his mother juggle 2 jobs, cleaning offices during the day and selling snacks outside a local school in the evenings. He saw exhaustion carve lines into her face. He heard her quiet crying at night when she thought he was asleep. That was when he started singing seriously. At first, it was just inside their small one-room house with a tin roof that rattled during heavy rain. then at church, then at small barangay gatherings. Every time he sang, people went quiet. Not because he was flashy. Not because he was loud. But because he sang like he meant every word. Still, not everyone believed in him. Classmates mocked his music taste. "Bro, it's not 1950 anymore," they laughed. Some said he would never make it singing grandpa songs. Daniel smiled politely, but inside, doubt grew. One afternoon, while scrolling on a borrowed phone, he saw auditions for America's Got Talent. His heart pounded. America felt like another planet. But something inside whispered, "Try." His mother didn't hesitate. "If you don't chase your dream," she told him softly, "you'll always wonder what could have happened." They didn't have money for flights. Community members contributed small donations. His church organized a mini concert fundraiser. Daniel performed 3 Elvis songs that night. By the final chorus, the entire hall was singing along. That was the moment he realized this dream wasn't selfish. It inspired others too. Months later, he stood backstage in Los Angeles. The lights were blinding. The stage felt enormous. His palms were sweaty. He could hear the crowd's chatter, excited but impatient. At the judges' table sat the famously hard-to-impress Simon Cowell, arms crossed, studying Daniel carefully. "What are you singing?" Simon asked. "An Elvis song, sir," Daniel replied. Simon's eyebrow lifted slightly. "That's a risk." "Yes, sir," Daniel said, voice trembling but steady. "But it's who I am." The music began. A slow instrumental intro filled the theater. Daniel closed his eyes. For a split second, he imagined his mother watching from home, probably gripping a pillow tightly. He sang the first line. The tone was warm, velvety, surprisingly deep for someone so young. The audience shifted in their seats. Heads tilted. Simon leaned forward slightly. As Daniel moved into the second verse, his nerves faded. His voice grew stronger, more confident. He wasn't impersonating Elvis with dramatic hip swings or exaggerated gestures. He stood still, letting the emotion carry the performance. Then came the chorus. Powerful. Controlled. Filled with longing. Halfway through, the band softened unexpectedly, leaving Daniel nearly alone vocally. It was a risky arrangement, raw and exposed. His voice wavered for half a second, but instead of breaking, it cracked with emotion. The kind of crack you can't fake. The audience felt it. Somewhere in that moment, Daniel wasn't just singing about love or heartbreak. He was singing about absence. About a father who never returned. About watching his mother grow tired. About believing in something when others laugh. The final note soared higher than anyone expected. He held it, steady, ringing, unwavering. Silence. A heavy, electric silence. And then the theater erupted. The entire audience rose to their feet. Cheers thundered through the room. Daniel opened his eyes slowly, almost in disbelief. Simon Cowell stood up. That alone was monumental. When the applause finally settled, Simon spoke. "I've heard a lot of Elvis over the years," he began honestly. "Most of it feels like karaoke. But you," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "You didn't try to be Elvis. You were Daniel. And that's why it worked." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Simon continued, "There's something very sincere about you. And that sincerity is rare. For yes. Unanimous." Back in Cebu, neighbors packed into Daniel's tiny house to watch the episode air weeks later. When Simon praised him, his mother burst into tears, covering her mouth. Daniel, sitting beside her, squeezed her hand. Though he didn't win the entire competition, that audition changed everything. The video went viral. Messages poured in from around the world. Filipinos everywhere felt proud. Not because he copied a legend, but because he honored one while staying true to himself. Daniel later said in an interview, "I realized something. People may laugh at what makes you different. But that difference might be your greatest strength." He began writing original songs blending classic rock influences with Filipino soul. He performed across the Philippines. And every time he stepped on stage, he remembered the boy who almost gave up because others didn't understand him. That's the real victory. Not the applause. Not the standing ovation. But the courage to stay authentic in a world that pressures you to fit in. So if this story inspired you, if it reminded you of a dream you once buried, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because somewhere out there, another young dreamer is being told they're outdated, unrealistic, or not good enough. And maybe all they need is one chance to prove that even legends would applaud them.